On any given Sunday, people are starving by the time lunchtime rolls around. The last thing anybody would want to do is push lunchtime back 2 hours to go and deal with a crowd of screaming 4-year-olds. This will push the limit of any hungry person. This is important because the strong people who choose to sacrifice an early lunch for these kids are the people who will play a large role in shaping who these kids will one day become. My name is Colin Bryan, and I've worked at Fellowship Kids Ministry at Fellowship Bible Church for the last 6 years, teaching and ministering to the upcoming generation of children. Today I'm going to tell you about my experience working at FSK and the impact that it's had on the way that I communicate. First, I'm going to tell you about FSK and the role I play within the ministry, and then I'll explain which foundational communication principles and concepts I primarily use. And lastly, I'll talk about a concept and ethical implication that I think would improve the way that I communicate while working alongside the kids. Now that you know what this speech entails, I will now get started with telling you about my experience. I completed my service at Fellowship Bible Church. This is important because it might open y'all's eyes to an opportunity to invest in the lives of little kids in order to help them grow as a person and as a child of God. The mission of my organization, according to fellowshiponline.com, emphasizes a few key ideas. The first is making disciples by God's grace for His glory at home and across the world. And the second is a more condensed version: connect, transform, multiply. I've been teaching at Fellowship for 6 years now. My job is to greet the kids, their parents, play with them, entertain them, take them to music, and teach them a Bible lesson. No, none of this is rocket science, but the means of communication with which I have to use are very widespread in order to get my point across to the kids. Each Sunday, things typically start off fairly smooth, but before you know it, somebody's crying for no good reason, and you have to use your words to the best of your ability in hopes that they will stop. Every now and then, a guest child will show up, and they will typically bring trouble along with them. A couple of weeks ago, a guest child came in, and she was trouble from the get-go. Unfortunately, you cannot discipline another person's child the same way that you would discipline your own. So as they're chewing up Cheez-Its and spitting them out at other students rather than sitting there just whooping their rear end, you have to use your words and hope that they will stop just based on what you're saying to them. Once it comes time to teach the lesson, you have to do your best to communicate the lesson to them in a way that they will understand. My service work supported the organization's missions in the sense that by God's grace, we have the ability to teach the kids. We're teaching the kids for His glory, and we are discipling them here at home so that they will one day be disciples at home and across the world, teaching by God's grace and for His glory. Moving on to my next point, there is a communication principle and 2 communication concepts connected to my service story. This is important because it will help narrow down and define communication abilities that a person will need in order to serve in this position successfully. A relevant communication principle is the communication is complex principle. The definition, according to UALR Survival Guide 2019, is there is no such thing as an easy or simple symbolic exchange between communicators. Even the most casual of interactions involves highly complex cognitive, psychological, and social processes. An example from my service that illustrates this principle is me trying to teach the kids a lesson. Rather than just simply telling them the story like I would to somebody our age, I have to break the story down in a way that they can understand. And although I'm simplifying the story, it shows the complexities of communicating with people of different ages. The first communication concept I chose is decoding. The definition, according to the Minnesota Library's published in 2019, is the process of turning communication into thoughts. An example from my service that illustrates this is when a child begins to cry. The example illustrates this because the kids are very young, which makes it hard to understand them as it is. So once one of them begins to cry, it takes some serious decoding skills to understand what the crying child is trying to tell you. The second communication concept is noise. The definition, according to the textbook, is anything that interferes with a message being sent between participants in a communication encounter. An example from my service that illustrates this concept is the noise being generated while the kids are playing. This example is illustrated because while the kids play, they're screaming, yelling, talking, throwing things across the room, all of which generates an abundance of noise, making communication with anybody in the room pretty difficult. Coming to my last point, based on my service experience, I can use communication and ethical implications to improve my communication and help improve my community. This is important because if you the listeners, take these concepts and implications and apply them from the start, you'll be much better off than I was when I started working at FSK. One communication concept I could use to improve my communication would be external attributions. The definition, according to the textbook, is connecting the cause of behaviors to situational factors. I chose this concept based on my service experience because it is a great example as to why communicating with the kids can be a challenge. I can use this concept to improve my communication by using it to help me understand that because these kids are so young, their age is going to reflect in the way that they behave. It helps me realize that I need to be more lenient with them because they process things much slower than somebody my age would, so I can't get frustrated when I'm sitting there trying to explain something to them and they're not getting it. An ethical implication I could use to improve my community would be the caring with grace implication. The definition, according to the UALR Survival Guide 2019, is understanding and meeting the needs of the people we interact with. I chose this implication based on my service experience because understanding the needs of the kids and the way they work is essential to serving the kids, or to successfully serving the kids. I can use this implication to improve my community by always making sure that I have a strong understanding of the people I'm working with in order to get along with and serve them in the best way that I possibly can. To wrap things up, today I told you about my experience working at FSK and the impact that it's had on my communication skills. First I told you about my experience, then I told you which foundational principles and concepts are primarily used, and I followed that with an ethical implication and a concept that I believe would enhance the way I communicated while working at FSK. The communication that kids are surrounded with can shape the people that they will one day become. So pushing that lunch back an extra hour to help shape our future generation